All right, hello everyone. We are back. We're going to do some tour play now for the Tour 12 division and use the Golf Clash Notebook app here. This is the Android version. I'm going to just set up my bag here. I'm going to use this bag. And let's see what I have for clubs. What I recommend for this tour is maybe Cat 6 or Cat 7. If you don't have those, you can use Sniper similarly, as long as it's, a 9 or a 10. Distance doesn't come in too much, and especially if you use power 3 balls exclusively with the occasional power 4, you can a lot of times make up for that distance that you may not have. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to put some things in here. Now I do like to use Apocalypse here, if at all possible. So Apoc 5, Apoc 6, Apoc 7, specifically Apoc 6, Apoc 7. So if I didn't have Apoc 6 or 7, I may, instead of a 5, just try to use a Thor's Hammer 6, for example, if I had that in replace. The only problem is you may need to use a lot of power 4 balls for this tour to kind of make up for that distance, because driver distance can come into play on the shootout, and you could essentially end up giving yourself up entirely. So when we're talking about driver and wood, those are kind of my preferences. And aside from that, pretty much nothing else is going to matter. You can set it up however you want. I'm just going to make sure that I kind of get everything in here and at least have it the way that my bag actually looks. So that looks pretty good right there. And another thing to note about this tour is, it's 30 million a game. It takes a lot of time to master this tour. I remember originally when I was going through this tour, I think I played maybe around 150-ish games for the week. And that's what it took to master it. Now, I should have made this video or a similar video at that time towards the end, because at the time, I had everything mastered. In fact, if you could see that I probably, most of my trophy counts, like for my main and this, they're right up there, kind of close to max. I never ended up getting to the max point in those 150 games. However, I used my primary, and I was maxed out on my primary aside from Tour 1, Tour 2, Tour 3, and Tour 4, which I was missing. And I was there for a substantial amount of time. So I would have been able to do the same with this. However, I just haven't been playing it. You can see that it's all the way down to pro now. It's fallen all the way down. I just do not play this account. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to just get one win. So I promote up this week. And then I'm just going to jump over to my main account and pretty much just use my main account. It has more coins, more that can be lost. So might as well go over there. However, keep in mind that this tour is all about the grind, learning the method. Once you learn the methods to the shots, you're going to be much better off and able to win. I might be a little bit sloppy here at first. Keep in mind that it's just all about that grind. Since I kind of already have it, I have it kind of figured out. It would probably take me, maybe 50 or 60 games to kind of get it back. But, I may be a little sloppy today because I never play Tour 12 at all. So let's go in and take a look here. You can see I have it about halfway done on this account. As I mentioned, I've never grinded on this tour whatsoever. So we are going to be using the notebook tool here, and I think it's about 60-ish trophies per win. So what I'll typically do on wins like this, I might just take it over this way towards the left, especially with a cat. So you'll see that I'm going to play maybe somewhere around 10 rings here. And as I mentioned, I do like to go over this way. Looks like just a little bit of overpower. You can see that I'm kind of backing off on what I do here, about 10 rings. And we'll also use just a slight bit of curl back just to kind of straighten out that wind effect. Now, with a cat driver, as I was mentioning, I don't mind going over this way, because what it does is I have more than enough to kind of get to the hole no matter what. With cat 6 or cat 7, I'm really going to be able to launch it a far way. If I was to go over to the right-hand side over here, a lot of guys do this, your positioning has to be absolutely perfect. And if you get a headwind and you aren't very close to this rough edge up here, with a straight headwind, I can have a big-time advantage, because I'll still be able to get to the hole, whereas those guys won't be able to. So that's the reason that you'll typically see me play over to the left here. When the wind is easy enough to do it. I got to make sure that I can stay out of the bunker, stuff like that. But let's just see how good this looks. As you can see, my opponent is going over that way. Like I meant, this can be a double-edged sword, so you do have to make sure that you stay fairly aggressive here. And you can see it's laid back a little bit. So straight into the headwind, especially with the Kingmaker ball, if we get that wind, my opponent here is going to be in trouble. It looks like he's not going to get a straight, but depending on what club he has, might kind of dictate what happens. You can see I got mostly a headwind here. That's really not going to be too big of a deal. Now, what you will see, I'm going to use a significant amount of curl here. When you curl the ball a lot, it's going to land more left. So you can see that I might be aiming over here what looks to be the rough. However, when I actually play this shot out, since I'm curling it all this, it should come back and actually be a little bit more centered into the fairway over there. So you'll see much farther away from the edge, and you can see that I can just pull it up towards the hole and easily get it to, no matter what the wind is, I can still easily get to the green by going over that way. With the sniper, it's not as easy. And you can see, as I was just mentioning here, with this strong headwind case, what my opponent has to do here is, substantially harder. Probably have to hit some kind of hook and hope that it hits the fairway. Also, might have to kind of change the spin up as well. So you can see that's what he's doing, some kind of slice shot. And then this is also going to be dependent upon the perfect land zone. You have to execute this perfectly, because it needs to hit the perfect part of the fairway where it's not going to go long in the rough, and then it's not going to also clip the rough on the way on the initial way over here. So that looks pretty well done, but you can still see not quite enough. And he's still got a little bit of range there too. So it's not in there. It's not in there like right on the hole or anything. It's still going to have just a little bit of work. So first thing that I'll do here is just try to position this on the green. Make sure that I kind of put it in a good spot to just feed down towards the hole. Make sure that it's not glitchy. So you can see that I can pick up the eagle here. And as I mentioned, you can see, how I had this tour kind of halfway done on this account. That's just basically primarily, I'd play like 1 or 2 games a week and just try to, keep it in Master 3 for the longest time. So that's pretty much what you're seeing is, my trophy accumulation from doing that with this account. However, you'll see that I think when we go over to my main, I think I have it maxed. It's very, very close if it's not. As I mentioned, that week that I played this tour, I was able to master this tour. But I have not played it since then. So however long ago that was, I don't even know when that was. July, August, like when did this come out? It was a long time ago. And, I took it upon myself. I built a lot of coins. So you can see that I just get that one chest, like I mentioned. Now we're just going to jump straight over. I'm just going to play on my main. as opposed to this. It's going to be essentially the same clubs, so don't be, deterred about, switching here. But this way, both of these accounts are going to promote. And I can't even remember where this one is. I know this one's been falling down too, because there'll be often times that I'm just doing notebook stuff and I just do not play. You can see that account's been falling down. I think that, so this one's an expert. We should be able to get this one promoted up, thank goodness. Oh yeah, easily promote up. So I'll promote it up with just one win. So let's keep going here. Now that you can see I have a different bag, I'm just going to go ahead, switch up here, and I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm just going to kind of set my bag up. Now all these changes that I'm doing are going to be valid until I kind of change out of this. So these are like temporarily stored to memory the way that I'm doing this. So you'll see that they're never going to swap out until I switch bags or reset the app. So these are like temporarily kind of aligning to what my current bag situation is. So now that I have this one, let's jump in. We'll keep doing some. And as I mentioned, you could see there, I have this maxed. As I mentioned, I have all these maxed. You can see I'm missing 6 on tour 10 for whatever, but you'll see that the only thing I'm missing is these earlier tours. And I don't need to play as a max player, so you're not going to see me go back and ever try to grind those out. However, I do know how to, it's much harder to go back because you have to play only replays. However, I know enough about kind of the methodology of playing tour play that I can beat a lot of those replays anyway. But, maxing an account isn't high on my priority list. So that's the reason that you'll see, oftentimes that I'm kind of down in trophies. But let's keep going here. Now, if you don't want to play, I really don't care overall, but if you don't want to play replays, you can always just kind of back out like that, cycle out after every 20 seconds that it spins. Because there's no way of knowing, how many people are in tour right now and all those factors. So let's see if I can't get a game finally. This is one of the least fun things about Tour 12. There are times where this doesn't happen at all and it'll just kind of insta-match a lot. But then there's other times like this that you just can't buy a game. So let me just close down the app right now. Not sure why it's misbehaving here so poorly. So let's take a look here. Glenmonarch. Wait. Straight in the face. So what I typically do here is go left. Left is my preferred method. And what I typically do also is keep my cat on at all times. There's never going to be really a time where I go for a bag change here because I really like this setup for the shootouts. So once you do get to, this is kind of one of those tours that I just play one bag. It's very, very few tours that I do that. But toward 11 and 12, I just kind of set myself up exactly how I want to go into the shootouts. Nothing else really matters. So what you'll see here is I'm just going to try to kind of cut through here a little bit with some overpower. I'm thinking somewhere up towards here with a little bit of curl. Not going to need the notebook tool here for a straight wind. Just going to set it up, try to get it to somewhere around the short iron range, hopefully. So here you can see that we have a side wind. So this is one of the things that you don't see a lot of people do correctly. So we have a side wind. In a side wind situation, we need to play extra wind effect significantly because the ball just pushes very hard. And in this situation, it's going to push very hard from right to left, which will cause the ball to really deviate. So I'm looking at, maybe plus 20% here, even with a slight uphill shot. It might be about maybe minus 5% uphill, but I'm going to use plus 20%. Now, the first thing that I need to do is if I'm going to use the slider and everything, I'm going to need to scan this range. So that's the very first thing you need to always remember to do, figure out kind of where you are. It looks like maybe 75% or so. So that's what I'm going to use. So somewhere up in here, 10 rings. 10-ish rings is pretty much spot on what I'd like to do. So, and what this is mostly going to cover is wind effect here. So that's primarily what we're thinking about. And just going to adjust here the 10 rings with the 20% overplay. Perfect ball. And you can see it came in very, very tight. I was almost able to get that. It was about the perfect adjustment. And you can see with the plus 20% number, almost dead on. Now keep in mind, that's wind effect that I'm playing, not elevation. It's far different, two far different concepts. Even at a 9 wind, I'm using 20. So imagine if that was 13 miles per hour, what I'd be using. Maybe 30, maybe plus 30%. So do keep that in mind because wind effect is going to be very great, especially in the larger tours. And what you'll see most guys do is they'll underplay those side winds because they're not figuring out wind effect enough. Now, fortunately, the tailwinds and headwinds, they have a little bit more built in. It has kind of like a built-in amount, like built in to the slider. So the overplay is kind of already built into there. But it also doesn't account for wind effect though. So you still might need to, you might need to still like do some kind of overplay, but it needs to be much, much less scaled down. Maybe, just a little bit less. Not to mention that the wind effect isn't quite pushing the ball towards the side. It's just kind of pushing it longer, like towards the hole or away from the hole. So let's take a look here. Ideally, what you want to do is try to get this ball onto the green. It's very tough to do. With the tailwind situation, I pretty much always use my cat. So that's what we're looking at here. Side wind case, 12-ish rings, give or take. I'm going to be pulling away from max, maybe down to here, so maybe 11-ish rings. As I mentioned, it's going to be kind of right down here towards max club. And I'm just trying to play my ball guide offset right now. So that's what you can see that I'm doing. Going to pull down towards 11-ish rings. Didn't get my perfect ball. So typically that mistake is going to push you a little bit offline, but maybe I didn't quite play enough wind effect there anyway. So it's going to come down to a game of inches here. 2 decent shots that had good depth, and it looks like I just lost that one by a yard. It just really is a grind as to whether or not you can hit it in here. And usually on headwinds there, I'd have a slight advantage with being able to go at that with a driver. I find it a little bit easier to hold the green with driver than with wood. As you can see, it's very, very challenging to kind of get that distance down and hit that and keep that on the green is almost impossible. It's very, very tough. It requires a perfect shot. Essentially, everything needs to align perfectly for that to happen. And if you can keep it in that 7 to 8 yard range, you'll typically win on a coin flip. As long as, well, the only thing that you might lose to is, just on a coin flip. Essentially, one guy's in there, half a yard closer, for instance. It's usually when you get to that 9-10 range that you start to potentially leave yourself vulnerable to being beat by an opponent, because it's very hard to get inside of, it's almost impossible to get inside 7 yards. You have to keep it on the green to keep it within 7. So let's keep going here. What I typically do here is play down to the lower fairway. Now what you'll see is I'm playing away from max. I'm going to use just a little bit of top spin here. Pulling away from max, so maybe 9-ish, 10 rings, somewhere in there, with some wind effect. Or with some curl to kind of counter the wind effect, is what I mean to say. And all I'm trying to do more than anything is just kind of position it down here, get it to where I can still get a cat. That's a little bit shorter than I expected it to be. I think the tee shot is uphill. I got to start looking at this. Oh, and that's another thing. That's another thing that I wanted to talk about. Remember how I mentioned that elevation here, usually you stay within the 20% bounds. This is the only course that doesn't apply for. You'll see this next shot that we're going to have into the green here is going to be the most uphill tee shot in the game. And you'll see that it's significantly uphill here. So let's see what we're looking at, of course. So we just got a headwind, and my drive is laid back, did not make it as far as it needed to. So that's really going to make things interesting. As I mentioned, this is pretty much the most uphill shot in the game. So let's take a look. We're also going to be pulling up towards max here. So 9-ish rings here. Hate going into overpower. Perfect ball. Looks like overall not too bad. A little scary anytime that you have to pull it off like that, but you can see kind of what my adjustment looks like. I like to use maybe somewhere around minus 25%. Keep in mind with my slider positioning there, I'm going into max, so it needs to be at least 9 rings there. So let's take a look, see what we get for the shootout. Typically going to be driver for this hole. I always go right on this hole. Pretty much no exception. This is a pretty hard driver shootout going to the left. This is a very hard wind to go right though. So with that being said, I might just, I would consider going left here. Let me put it to you that way. Now what you'll see is this kind of shoots way downhill, but it tends to go a little bit more uphill towards the right-hand side than it does towards the left-hand side. Ooh, did not expect that. So he missed the fairway. So let's take a look here. I usually use very close to the number here. I'm thinking maybe somewhere around +5. Keep in mind I'm going to be pulling away from max, significantly towards max. So maybe towards mid-club. So I might use the mid-club adjustment here. I also don't need to get too aggressive. So you'll see that the way that I probably try to play this is going to be more aligned with this to make sure that more than anything that I just win the shootout here, as opposed to making a big mistake. And you can see that the great ball actually cost me. It was going to land onto the fairway there, and there you can see I actually lost by 1 yard because of that mistake. So it was the great ball that pushed me up into that bunker. Keep in mind that the ball always, when you are pointed towards higher ground, and that's what happens is I'm pulling up towards higher ground. And since I pulled up towards higher ground there, the ball short landed. Or not short landed, but over launched. So you could see that even though I went the correct number of rings, now, had I hit the great ball, had I hit the perfect ball, it would have been a moot point. It wouldn't have mattered. All I needed to do was hit the fairway there, and of course it lands on the bunker. So what I'll typically try to do with a tailwind, it really depends. There's often times that I might go for the green over here. Not sure I'm going to do that or not. Probably not. Another thing that you can do is you can get slightly aggressive here and just try to hit, some kind of curl shot. Yeah, that good ball is going to probably land on the rough. Just caught the fairway. So all I'm trying to do is kind of aggressively put it up here. Was trying to potentially, get it to hop over the bunker into the rough. But I'm definitely not going to waste premium balls in tour play. So kingmakers for me, berserkers. And that's pretty much it. So next, I'm just going to kind of scan this zone here. $25, 20% or so. Ring and a half. Just try to squeak this onto the green. You can see with what I'm doing with the ball guide. And if you can get your perfect ball, you give yourself a relatively good chance to get the hole out. Looks like I just missed it. So it should shoot off to the left. There's almost no way that it's going to hold that line. But that's one of the reasons with the aggressive wind, when it gets strong kind of towards the tail, that I'll try to go for it, is because you can get it up there so close. And if I can get it over that bunker into the rough, you know, I find it to be very makeable. Even for a tough side wind, it'll still be very, very holdable from the rough up there, kind of just short of the green. It's a lot easier than, I mean, the only other thing that I'll sometimes do is position it perfectly at the top of the fairway there, which is right at min club for a short iron. However, you know, that's going to take, you know, just a little bit of kind of discipline and just trying to practice a little bit more than I'm willing to do. You know, I'm not grinding this tour on the daily. So let's take a look here. There's two different shots that I play. We'll have to see the wind to know which version I'm going with. This is probably a driver for me. This is probably a driver wind. You can also get the direction in ahead of time. This is a very, very tricky shot. I usually use about 1.5 on the backspin, more or less. My ring play is going to be entirely different than a cat. If he does a cat, my wind would be completely different. However, you know, with a driver, it's going to be, you know, a different ring adjustment. So let's see how this comes out. Looks pretty good. The great ball probably actually helped because it looked like it ended up shooting straight up through there, which that means with a perfect ball, it probably wouldn't have been that perfect. So let's take a look. 13.4. Keep in mind, we're very much towards min. We might be pulling up from it a little bit. So I'm thinking somewhere around the neighborhood of 9-ish rings. And what I'll typically do, 1.5 on the backspin. And we're going to do some wind effect play as well. So you can see that I'm just going to try to straighten out the line with my wind effect here. Right around 9 rings here. Great ball. Looks like it's also shooting up through and just coming up just a little bit short. Let's keep going here. Try to get back on track. I gave up one on that Greenwich Point shootout that I should, you know, going second there. All I needed to do was hit the fairway, and the great ball ended up, you know, costing me that. So it's always nice to just kind of grind away and eliminate your mistakes. But sometimes it takes one mistake on certain holes for you to realize what you need to do differently next time. So let's take a look. What I'll typically do here is just lay up. Keep in mind we're going to be pulling up towards max. So I'll probably go somewhere in the neighborhood of 11-ish rings. And you don't got to be too exact. I'm doing just a little bit of an overplay here, and that's because of wind effect. So because I know that the ball guide is going to be compressing a bit, you'll see that I just kind of am comfortable enough to overplay that and still have it work out. And again, this is going to be another hole where we're talking about in elevation, a very, very elevated green here. So I'm thinking, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe minus 20%. Also keep in mind that you're probably even going to have to fluctuate that ring adjustment. You'll have to play your, am I pulling to like lower ground or higher ground with my ring pull? Because that's also going to come in play when you're shooting into this green. So, and here is case in point here, you know, I'm going to have to under pull my rings because of that. So as I mentioned, maybe minus 20% here. You'll see that I'm going to use the wind direction. We're going to be pulling away from max significantly, probably towards mid. And also keep in mind, as I was stating above, that anytime you pull to lower ground, you're probably also going to want to under pull rings as well. So going 8.6 would probably be too much because of the fact that I'm pulling to that lower ground. So you saw I probably went, what, 7 rings there? You have to consider these things when you're playing. You can't just use what the tool gives you, because we can't predict that slope is basically pushing, you know, at kind of a, you know, the grade of that hill right there that I'm adjusting rings on is probably 45-60%. It's very significant. It's a lot. So since you're going down at such a high rate, the way that the shot arc is changing is just too much. So you'll see that the game, you know, it changes your shot arc too intensely, and it makes it very, very hard for the ball to get back up to that height that it set out to. So that's why you can see me underplaying those rings so much. But what the tool does is at least gives you an idea. Now keep in mind, if I was pulling to the side, you wouldn't have to underplay like that. Let's say it was a side wind, you know, I could probably play just the minus 20% and it would be relatively good. You have to be very, very careful to make sure that you're staying on the same height though, because you might be pulling lower than you think you are. So you do got to be very, very careful with that. Platinum chest, look at that. Didn't expect that. So let's keep going here. Now this hole can be kind of a pain as well, because you have to play it 2 different ways. You have to know the tailwind shot and you have to know the headwind shot. Well, or sidewind. Headwind, sidewind, it's pretty much a layup. Tailwind, it has its own way because you kind of have to go for the green. So one of the things I can do, I can prep my wind direction here. It looked pretty good actually. Just going to keep it with what the last hole looked like. Let's see what this looks like. Looks like it's going to come up a little bit short with that line. So I'll typically try to take off some of the top spin here. 6 bars. I'm thinking, you know, going somewhere around, You know, if my ball's going to be landing well beyond this, and you can see it's kind of close to the water already, so I'm not going to do too much here. Very, very minimal. No overpower. Just try to get it somewhere into the green or on the back is all I try to do here. So if that holds up on the green, that's fine. Otherwise, you know, I'll just pitch it up the hill. And the main reason for taking off the topspin is just to kind of control the way that it rolls through that rough. So let's keep going here. Do a couple more, at least about halfway done, I guess. Maybe about 4 more or something. I'll try to do a part 2 stream to this. For those of you who are interested, I'd like to get, you know, more range of holes. It's just very time consuming to sit and play here and, you know, keep using the tool and all that stuff. You know, it takes a lot to understand a full tool because there's 27 holes in general. And just because you play 27 holes doesn't mean you've played enough. Because you're bound to get lots of duplicates. So it typically plays about, it typically takes about 50 holes for you to see all 27. Or at least to get, you know, probably if you play about 40 holes, you'll probably see about 25 of them. And then you'll just have 2 that just will not come up no matter what. What I'd like to do is get some more of those, like I'd really like to see hole 6 on the shootout of the Porthello Cove so we can see a really large elevation shot. Greenwich Point here. Couple different ways to do this. What I might typically try to do, we did this in the tournament, is I may try to do something like this. I'm not going to waste premium balls. I don't even care if I lose. Like it's just not something that I'm going to do. I'd rather, put together kind of free to play guides for you guys. So I'm kind of looking kind of 10 rings over, and then I'm just going to play a lot of curl. So you'll see that I do it like this. And I'm just kind of purposefully top spinning it, trying to get it up here as far as possible. And hopefully keep it from rolling down into that rough. That's why I'm putting the full curl on. Because if you don't do it right, it will roll down into that rough. Another thing you can do is, you can go through with premium balls and potentially get that to land right on the very front of the fairway with What would be a good ball here? Some type of gear ball or something would probably land on the fairway. And that's the hardest part of that shot, because there you can see that it actually rolls over into the rough. And here you can see a very strong headwind, which actually makes my life a lot harder. This shot is very, very tough, but it still can be done. So what I'll typically do is about maybe 25-ish rings. Just trying to get, an idea of where the ball's going to land. Before going for this hook shot. So I'm going to stack one full target, and then I'm thinking somewhere around here. So it did just catch the fairway. I was trying to trickle it off the rough there. Looks like I may have went maybe about 4 rings too much as well. I wanted to make sure. It's better to be safe than sorry. So you can see all that fairway to the left. So I'd rather overpull there. And you'll see, we had a very similar play to this in the tournament, with where, we had a very similar type wind to this. And when you get winds like that, it can be very, very challenging for this hole. Eagle becomes much tougher. And you can see if I clipped the rough there, I would have been right on the fairway, had myself kind of an easy little pitch. Now, otherwise, it kind of becomes kind of just a little bit tougher. Even hitting perfect ball here, you might have to be very, very careful. So what you're going to see, I'm going to try to point it down towards the hole, and then I'm going to try to take a look at what the wind does on this line as well. That's way off. So that has no chance. Thought it had no chance. It was really bad on the timing, but what you'll see, and that's one of the reasons to play that slope, I thought that was going to land up on the fringe. It was luck. So what I expected to have happen is that to hit the fringe, and usually hitting the fringe, that would deflect offline. But you can see that's one of the main reasons to play the slope. So if you play the slope and play perfect speed, you can actually sometimes get lucky. So it just requires, kind of a perfect speed play. It looks like it's not going to come all the way down. I'm going to see if I can get this guy to re-up. This guy's in one of our clans. What I'll typically do is just, if I win, I'll just give it right back. See if he'll come back in. Nope. I was going to just give him another game. I'll usually just go to the tee box and forfeit straight off the tee. Just so both clans are earning points. It's kind of a cool thing. I'm not trying to take, people's coins or trophies or any of that, so. Porthello number 1 again. And this kind of ties in with what I mentioned about getting similar holes multiple times. Going to try very, very similar. I try not to overspin this too much. I also try. So let's take a look here. 11 towards max, maybe 10.5 rings. I may need just a little bit more distance here. I'm not going to use curls. Sometimes maybe I will, but not in situations where the wind is this strong. And you can see it does clip the rock there. Not a big deal. You know, and that's one of the main reasons that I'll try specifically not to curl, is because I know that the ball is going to kind of naturally roll down that way. So it's okay to miss right. All you want to do is typically set yourself up for the second shot. And we're going to do the minus 20%. Also keep in mind, we played hole 4. Is it hole 4? I think. Hole 4 from this course, which is also a par 4, where we have a huge slope. Keep in mind the same logic is going to apply if we ever pull down into the sand here. We're going to need to underplay even with the minus 20. And this is actually going to be a perfect example. So what you're going to see me do, I'm going to be pulling down towards min club, right? So I'm going to probably use the min adjustment. We're very, very close to it. However, I may still need to underpull this just slightly as well because of what I was mentioning. Well, it just depends. We'll have to see if I actually get into the bunker or not. Because it looks like in this case, I'm going to be kind of wrestled just up onto the hill. So since I'm not down into the sand fully here, I'm just going to kind of go, ooh, didn't want that great ball. Still looks pretty good. Just comes into the right. So you'll see in that case, I was able to use the 5.7. But let's say I pull way down into that sand where it starts to, the gradient starts to change. Make sure you underpull, even with that minus, you can see I use minus 20%. However severe the slope is, you need to kind of underpull those. However, you could see that I kind of still stayed up towards high ground. So I used my max. I used that max. Well, whatever the min adjustment was, you know, I still used the full range of that, which was 5.7 rings. But if I was pulling down to lower ground, like significantly where the grade changes, I might only pull 4.7 rings, for example, there. But you could see that I pretty much, for the most part, just stayed up at the high ground, so I didn't do anything. So just keep that concept in mind, because that's going to be it's one of the more advanced concepts of the game, but it's a very, very important one to learn. And it's hard because it took me so long to learn. And the main reason is because I tend to think of things as in the real world, you know, how do physics work? And everything that we do in this game is not involving physics. Well, not everything, but you'll see a lot of things that can go against the law of nature. So you can't be thinking of how this happens in the real world. You have to be thinking of the way the game was designed. The game is programmed to design to work the way that they programmed it to do so. So that's really the only thing that matters. The universe is essentially this game. It's not our society in any way, shape, or form. If they wanted to make gravity be a different constant than a real, they could make the ball move faster. They could make the ball, drop to the ground faster or hang up in the, everything is based on the game's parameters, not real life physics. And we don't know how much they try to model physics. So you really can't bring in too many exact examples unless you can kind of back it up with something that you see in game. And when we look at things like For example, when we look at things like moving to lower ground, that would do nothing in real life. Just because you move a target to lower ground doesn't do anything. So in real life, that doesn't even exist. So here's what I'm going to try to do here. I'm going to try to play, a little bit cautious. What I'll typically try to do is I'll try to play the slope a little bit more. However, I don't need to play the slope here to win. All I need to do is put the ball in play and get it onto the green. Another great ball. Again, keep in mind that this is going to launch, so it's going to fly just a little bit longer than it shows on the ball guide. This is what I was trying to do last time and failed to do. But this time I was able to do it. And you can see that I'm playing it very safe. I'm playing it over to about 2.5 yards, just to make sure that it rolls onto the green. I don't want to keep it up high up on that slope. So that's why you could see. And keep in mind that I'll also change that spin. You can see I got a tailwind there. And I used, what did I use? Probably about 3 backspin. I might only use, I might use half a bar of topspin if the wind was the exact opposite direction at 12 miles per hour. So really the spin, you need to play it in kind of a range. You need to play the wind and the condition at hand, not necessarily to fixed winds and fixed number of rings, stuff like that, bars of backspin. You always want to be kind of thinking about that and making sure that you're kind of fluctuating those. I didn't expect that. All I'm going to do here is probably lay up. Just kind of take my normal road, which is over here. So you'll see that I'll just kind of bump it through here towards max ring adjustment, which I'm assuming is going to be somewhere around 10. So if I was to use the notebook tool, which I really didn't need to there, you can see somewhere right around 10. I would have curled it more than that if I thought I needed. I thought there was going to be a substantial amount of wind effect there, especially at max driver. But it kind of actually only went over a couple yards, probably because of all the topspin. Topspin tends to negate wind effect. Backspin tends to dramatize it. So you'll see that it's much more like, it'll cut much harder to the right with backspin than it will with topspin. So let's see if I can't get this one to drop this time. It looked like, what was that? Another side wind, right? And very similar to what I was mentioning before. I did, plus 20 on this. If the wind's stronger, which I think it might be, I might go minus, so it is. So maybe let's even try maybe minus plus 30. Let's just see where we are in the span. It looks like I'll be pulling down maybe just a little bit inside mid club. So somewhere around here, maybe somewhere around here. So 12.4 on the rings, give or take. And let's see if this doesn't get me in the ballpark. I'm thinking somewhere around here. Perfect ball. Oh, and just too much ring. So barely. We're talking, 5% too much here. So, a half a ring there would have been about perfect So as I mentioned, with your overplays, don't always keep them consistent. It's also dependent on what direction the wind is pointed, stuff like that. And you'll see oftentimes that you'll be much more dialed in with the tool. And this really only happens in the very, very later tours. Once you get up to winds around 10. So if you can keep winds well below 10, it still happens, but it's usually not 20, 25, 30%. We're usually talking about like 10 or 15% overplay. So do keep in mind that it's scaled to the magnitude of the wind. The stronger the wind, the more that it happens. So there you can see, decent approach. I wasn't watching the setup, but saw that they backdoored in. There's nothing wrong with the backdoor approach for this hole, but it's not something that I typically do. It really doesn't, the shot doesn't require it, and usually the ball ends up kind of cutting at an angle. To kind of keep that on that line is very, very challenging to do. So here we're going to get another shootout, and I pretty much, there's also two shots that you need to know for this one. This is going to be the driver version of the shootout. You'll see we'll be down towards min club a little bit, and somewhere maybe right around 7.3 rings at min club, give or take. And also playing wind effect. So you'll see that I'm just trying to kind of offset my guide, try to get it somewhere in the vicinity of where it needs to be. And I'm able to nestle it pretty close to the hole overall. 2.18 isn't too bad. You can see with my backspin, I was pretty controlled. You need to be considering about that wind effect. It's going to be a very important thing. And trying to do this with a wood is going to be far more challenging. What is this, a power 4 ball? This is going to be a bear. You never want to attempt this shot. So it's going to be very, very tough to do. You really got to get the driver shot. He had a Poc 5. He can copy my shot. It's only 2 or 3 backspin, depending upon the wind. If it's more into the face, you might want to use 2. If it's kind of a side like that, try to almost get it up to 3. It's going to be much, much tougher to do with a sniper. And you'll see wind effect there, just kind of taking that shot over. You need to make sure that you're offsetting that ball guide and, able to figure that out and try to keep that going towards the hole there. So let's keep going here. Maybe one more. I'm thinking. I don't know where we are on time. I'm trying to keep these all around 1 hour. And I kind of forget where I started this thing. But I know I've probably played at least 8 holes or so, maybe 9. So we got to be getting up there somewhere. All right, well, maybe I'll just cut this off. Jeez. All right, I'm just going to pull this. I'm assuming I'm right about an hour. I'm just tired of it scrolling, not finding anybody that's live. Let me just kind of just talk about an overview real quick. Let's think about some of the important concepts that I covered here. The first thing that you'll see that I do with the notebook tool, when I'm about to set up for a shot, you'll see that I scan the range. That's an important thing to do. What the scanning does is it allows you to figure out where you're going to be pulling to, where you're currently at, and wherever you pull to is going to be the distance of the shot. So you need to be thinking about where you're pulling to with the rings and where that's going to fall on the slider positioning. Keep in mind, you don't have to be absolutely perfect on the slider positioning. For example, let me just go over, my wood here, which would be like a sniper, and, very similar to a sniper here. Let's look at max. Say that we're at max and we're going to be pulling back. So let's just look at, 80% here is how many rings? 10.6. Let's say, what's 75? It's 10.5. What's 70? 10.3. So we're talking about very, very few rings that are going to be in a 10% range. It's not going to be a lot of error we're talking about here. So you don't need to know exact. You don't need to get too carried away with that. With, how far do I pull down? You just got to throw it in that window, get it as close as you can, because there's no in-game percentages. There's nothing on the screen that tells us this is 70% club. Like this is in the range, 70%. So you just got to do your best to make an educated guess as to where you're pulling to. Not where you start, but just where you're pulling to. And if you want to use the slider, you have to always, the very first thing that you need to do is test the range. Because it's the only way that the tool is going to be effective, is if you pull and wherever you're pulling the rings to, you use that distance as your slider value. So when I go in to adjust this slider, I need to know where about the distance falls in that span. Aside from that, you can see, I talked about the clubs that you should use. Let's talk about those wedges and short irons as well. You saw me doing distinctive overplays. What I typically always do when I'm in there close to the hole within short iron range is, instead of playing wind effect, which you'll see that I do with my drivers and woods, I'll be offsetting the ball guide. Because of the fact that almost 100 out of 100 times I set up to land on a zone where I can play an overplay, I'll typically play short iron and wedge with an overplay. What that means is, instead of using, a ball guide offset, which is hard to calculate for different winds, what you'll see that I'll do is I'll just use the elevation as an overplay guidance. So if I figure out that the shot is a 12 side wind, and if you guys need to go back and recheck some of the shots, I did multiple short iron shots in this tutorial where you saw me using 20 to 30% on the overplay. The overplay isn't going to be exact to the land zone. What it's going to do is it's going to change your land zone, but it's going to account for the wind effect. And you can see that the ball is shifting very dramatically. If, you're going an extra 2 rings, 3 rings on a Hornet, for example, and then having it align towards the hole, it just shows you how dramatic that overplay actually is accentuated with the wind. So keep in mind that that's something you're always going to need to do. Aside from that, you'll see that I'm pretty much just using the slider positioning, trying to figure out where I'm going to be pulling to, using the wind directional, and then using the slider. And very, very little elevation is going to be used unless it's a hole like a very uphill shot. So for instance, this could happen a lot on rough irons. It could happen a lot on sand wedge, where you could be at kind of lower ground and need to shoot up to a higher target. Similarly, you'll see on the Porthello Cove course, you'll see a lot of uphill shots, and you'll also see a lot of downhill shots. So do make sure that you start to, there's going to be holes. I don't know what the percentage is on, say, Porthello Cove number 6, but maybe it's 40%, maybe it's 50% downhill. It's significant. It's one of the only holes in the game that's not going to play, close to 0 or close to 10, maxing out around 20. It's actually going to play very dramatic, 40, 50% grade downhill on that one hole. Similarly, I think there's a par 5. It's, I believe, hole 3. Where if you go up to the left fairway, you shoot down to a very low green as well. It's going to be a very similar elevation drop on that hole. We weren't able to see those in this tutorial, but I am going to be doing a part 2 of this. So do look out for the part 2, because I'm going to try to hopefully get some more holes and try to give you some more perspectives for navigating through Tour 12. Keep in mind that this tour is going to be a mega grind. It's not always going to go your way. You will make mistakes. You'll also get into some real sharks out there that are always playing Tour. So if you're not always playing Tour 12 like me, I can make mistakes. And the guys that are actually doing 100 games in Tour 12 a week, those guys have the shots kind of, if not mastered, they at least know the ring adjustments to go for the majority of the situations. So you do have to be on your game when going through navigating Tour 12. So good luck out there, guys. Let me know how it goes, and be on the lookout for a part 2 at some point. Good luck.